From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is RoadSigns. Here is your host, Seth Clevenger.
Thank you for listening to RoadSigns, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we're going to examine the transportation management software that lies at the core of most trucking and logistics operations. These systems have evolved from basic dispatch software to the more sophisticated operations and business intelligence platforms that we see today. But now the trucking industry is facing a time of significant change, with shippers demanding constant visibility of their freight in transit and an influx of capital fueling technology development. At the same time, fleets are under increasing pressure to improve driver retention and recruitment. So how will dispatch and operations software evolve to meet these challenges? We'll set out to answer that question in this episode. For starters, some of the biggest trends in technology development have been making their way into transportation. Data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning are beginning to unlock more actionable information and provide better decision support for trucking and logistics managers. I spent some time considering these possibilities at McLeod Software's 2019 User Conference in Denver, where I spoke with the company's CEO, Tom McLeod. I also sat down with Tom Curie, Vice President of Strategic Development at Kingsgate Logistics, a freight broker that is already doing some very interesting things with AI today. Let's go ahead and get into those interviews. We're here in Denver at McLeod Software's 2019 User Conference, and we're very pleased to welcome our illustrious host of the event, CEO Tom McLeod. So thank you very much for taking time out to join us, Tom.
Thank you, Seth, and thanks for joining us here in Denver.
Yeah, first off, it's always great to be here at this conference. I always come away with a lot of great insights and ideas, and I'll just mention that it's pretty remarkable to see how much it's grown really over the last handful of years. So thanks again for having us here.
Well, we've had great customers, and we've had great support from allied suppliers in the industry, and they help us to put on a really great meeting.
So one of the big themes that you addressed during the opening session was this sense that there's this transformational change occurring in the industry. You mentioned the advance of onboard technology, information technology, and changing freight patterns really all coming together. But I'll let you speak to that yourself. What are the main reasons you feel trucking is in the midst of a major change for the industry?
Well, in some ways, the freight industry and all industries are undergoing some change and some transformation. When the change is happening pretty slowly, we almost call that status quo, and it's happening so slowly that changes can happen without us realizing it. But the pace of change has certainly accelerated, especially over the last few years. And especially, as you have so many ideas being funded from outside the industry, and all kinds of solutions, and mainly technology solutions, appearing as options and capabilities that are having impact on the way freight is sourced, the way freight is covered, matched up, the way it's billed and paid. And so the accelerated pace of change and the new solutions coming at the existing carriers is I think, unprecedented.
No doubt it's busy times, and there's a lot to watch and monitor as we see all this technology and all these, like to your point, new players jump into the industry and attempt to disrupt it. But I like your comment that change can also be an opportunity. It doesn't have to be a threat. So I wanted to go into that a little bit more. In your view, how can motor carriers and 3PLs stay ahead of the transformational changes that we're seeing and benefit from them?
Well, certainly change creates challenges, and don't want to minimize that, but change is definitely going to create opportunities, especially if you have the right point of view and you're looking for the opportunity within a change rather than the challenge. You don't have to capitalize perfectly on the change, but if you can see an opening and be the first one in the door, you can move ahead of competition and really reap some great benefits.
Yeah, and you also spoke about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Of course, this is one of the huge trends that we see in software development. But how are you applying it today at McLeod, and what might you be able to do in the future through AI and machine learning?
Well, I mentioned the two main areas where I believe artificial intelligence and data science and then machine learning can have the best positive impact on transportation operations. One is in making pricing decisions, and that applies to strategic pricing, contract pricing, as well as spot pricing decisions. The secret to that is analyzing all the relevant data. And in trucking and transportation, the data that you've got access to, a lot of the relevant data is just a company's own internal data. And so there's not the millions and millions of data points that you might have if you're analyzing, let's say, a consumer purchasing habits. And so the problem's actually, from that standpoint, somewhat easier to attack. But properly bringing in all the relevant data helps you come back with good recommendations, and it can really give even mid-size to a large carrier some strategic advantage in the transportation marketplace. The second area where I felt like it can have the biggest payoff is in the matching the right truck to the right load in less time. So, seeing productivity increase, seeing better utilization of a fleet, that translates into profitability. Profitability lets you invest in other ways to move ahead of your competition or serve your customers better, and that translates into staying power in the marketplace.
Yeah, another topic I want to touch on is digital freight matching. This has been a pretty big topic in the industry in recent years with the emergence of some of the digital freight brokers like Convoy, Uber Freight, Transfix. But how do you think about this trend, and really how are you participating in it?
Mm-hmm. Well, you name off 3 freight brokers.
Yeah, that's right.
They have their own internal technology, but those companies really have closed systems. They put their freight out on their internal network, and then they've got carriers, or a lot of times individual lease operators, that sign up, and that's who the freight is visible to. We're participating in several versions of really more open platforms where visibility is more widely available and where there's more networking opportunity. We think that many of the brokerage operations are going to do just fine in that environment where they're looking to match up freight and capacity. And more of the carriers are getting comfortable about sharing capacity information with their brokers as they're competing against, again, the closed systems, companies that are really bent on maximizing margins, even though they may be offering temporary loss leader pricing to try and gain access to capacity.
Sure. And one of the questions that comes up when we look to automate freight transactions, and to streamline some of the processes and make some of the just the standard procedures, the grunt work simpler. We have this question of how do you balance automation with human control and a human touch? What is the right way to go about business process automation in an industry like trucking, especially with freight transactions, while still balancing the need for to protect the relationship and build a relationship between a trusted relationship between a shipper and a carrier, 3PL, all these parties?
Well, if the routine transactions can be automated, it actually frees individuals up within the transportation company to give more time and attention to the exception transactions. It should also allow more time for face-to-face contact with the customers and in building the relationship. The relationships are, still important in the transportation business, because when the shipper trusts you with their freight, that's their livelihood. They've got things that very important that make it to the destination on time, because that's the lifeblood of their business. It's a little bit different, although pricing is always a factor. One of the things that's very tough on the electronics stores. Remember Circuit City? Well, people could go by, look at the article they wanted to purchase, compare prices, and brands in the store and then go back and order it online. Very little loyalty translated there. A little bit different in the freight business, again, because of the long-term relationship. You're not just buying one, you're not just transacting one load this year. You get most of the shippers are doing many loads on a weekly basis, and again, very important that they maintain that access to the capacity during good times and bad. That said, there's obviously still price sensitivity based on available capacity in the marketplace, and certainly any body with enough price differential can be swayed to go another way.
Transport topics in one word: authoritative.
Knowledge. Outstanding.
Reliable.
We asked Transport Topics readers to describe us in one word.
Informative.
Informative.
Integrity.
The Bible. Authoritative.
The authority.
Transportation information, that's two, but I gotta have it both.
Physically large. Oh, that's 2 words.
Visit influence.ttnews.com/say hello to find out what they're talking about.
Another thread that we hear about the business environment right now is that shipper expectations for their carriers and brokers are rising. They're placing more demands on transportation companies, and they want more freight visibility. So how do you see that trend, Tom, and what can transportation companies do to meet those expectations moving forward?
Well, especially the higher volume shippers, the carriers and the transportation managers, the freight brokers, are sometimes somewhat at the mercy of the big shippers. And frankly, a lot of times the shipping department at large corporations are not all that sophisticated. Most of the large manufacturers and production companies have their best people, making this stuff and selling it to their customers. Sometimes the requests being made by the shipper representatives in the traffic department are simply blanket requests and can be very difficult to comply with. Being able to have good ongoing relationships with the shipper, where you're helping to educate them on what's happening and on what's possible, and then listening to them to hear about the things that will be truly beneficial, really takes effort. It really takes that face time. And when a shipper makes an unreasonable request, that strong communication, if you've got that pipeline in place, then you can a lot of times work to come up with some more reasonable compliance. At the same time, the shippers are definitely wanting more visibility, because they want to provide that to their customer.
Right.
Constant visibility sometimes of all shipments has become almost table stakes.
Right.
A price of entry into certain markets, and I'm sure that's going to expand, especially as it's become easier and easier to get that visibility. So I would expect that trend to continue.
Sure. And shifting gears a little bit, I did want to touch on one of the more interesting new features that McLeod has rolled out recently. It's driver choice for Loadmaster, and this is enabling drivers to create preferences for the types of loads they'd like to deliver. So what do you think? I mean, do you think the industry is going to move more in this direction of giving drivers a little bit, more, say in exactly the types of jobs they're taking, and in a part of an effort to boost driver satisfaction and retention, which of course is always a top issue for trucking companies?
Oh yes, we, from the reaction we've gotten from our customers and prospective customers and in other industry segments, we think it's a very powerful thing to engage your drivers, help them not only feel like they're a part of the process, but help them to actually be a part of the process. I think the companies are pleasantly surprised that the drivers don't just go crazy with a lot of their requests. They're reasonable people. They understand the company has to make it, but for them to be consulted and have some input on their load assignments, especially your experienced people, this pays them a great compliment and can engender some great loyalty there by the driving force.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch that moving forward. Another big topic in recent years has been blockchain. Certainly in the world of the technology world, it's just been everywhere. And that conversation, of course, is carried over into transportation, and we've started to explore how this shared ledger technology could really help to streamline certain freight transactions and certain applications in our world. And McLeod, of course, is a founding member of the Blockchain and Transport Alliance, which has been putting in a lot of the work on the front end of this. But over the past year or so, I think it's certainly safe to say that the hype has died down considerably. But that doesn't mean that there aren't still real opportunities and real applications on the horizon. So, what do you think about the potential for blockchain today? Where do you see it?
Well, the potential for the technology is the same as it always was, and it's very common for a new technology to be overhyped when it first appears, and then for there to be disillusionment when it doesn't immediately deliver. And this is a technology that will require work, and especially in the supply chain, standards to get things in a common format. The shipping community, there's a couple of large shippers with private blockchain projects underway. The last thing we need to see in the transportation industry is for 50 of the largest shippers to come out with their own format, and the carriers then asked to comply with 50 different ways of communicating the same information. If we can agree on a set of standards, then a lot of the visibility that the shippers are looking for today will be easy to supply, and we'll be able to supply it through direct networks without going through third parties and aggregators, where sometimes there's a delay on getting the information, or there can even be accuracy issues with some of the current providers. So the technology shows great promise. We've got 600 members in beta currently. That does include some members of the shipping community, so we're optimistic that the use cases and the standards formats are going to be useful. Getting them implemented across the board will be the neat trick. If we pull it off, it'll be very beneficial for the industry as a whole.
Now, Tom, you've been developing software for trucking operations for quite a while now. I think 36 years is the estimate that you provided.
Yeah.
Now, since you have this perspective, I want to ask you just how much you've seen technology change this industry, how much this industry has evolved through the use of technology over the years, and just how much you think it will continue to do so from when you started to where we are now and where we're going.
Well, certainly the capability of the systems, the change there has been amazingly remarkable. Sometimes I say that our original system would print a freight bill and print a check, and that's it. We were replacing typewriters, in the offices of the trucking companies, and just simply reducing manual labor to that extent. As we got into operations and planning, we began to see better utilization of the equipment, the carriers asking for more, in a competitive situation. The programming technologies got better, allowing us to develop more quickly. But these days, even a version 1 product has to be robust, for it to come out the door. And the trucking companies' requirements from the shippers is light years away from where we were, at the beginning. We've had great input from our customer base. The great thing about working with trucking companies is they'll tell you what they want. And if you can scramble and get there, they'll be loyal and continue to give you good input. And thankfully, we've had a great group of customers that has kept us pointed in the right direction now for a long time.
And you see it continuing in the future. I mean, just more and more change through the use of technology. I imagine that another 36 years, this industry will look quite different yet again.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, there's so many new technologies. Really, many of the new technologies in the truck. This morning I mentioned, lane departure warnings, collision avoidance, adaptive cruise control. Those are actually software based. A lot of the technologies on the trucks for EPA compliance over the last 15 years has been at the hardware level. But the behavior of the truck, even the recording of the images and knowing when to capture, an image for future reference is, based on software. So a lot of those, most of those products are things we interface or, capture the information for. And so a connected system that helps evaluate and provide the right recommendations to the user and to the trucking company management is crucial to the efficient operation of the trucking companies today.
It'll be very fascinating to see how this all evolves in the years and decades ahead. But you know what, this has been a great conversation. But I think we're at a good stopping point here, so we'll let you get back to the rest of the conference. Thank you so much for joining us, Tom.
All right, Seth, thank you. Have a great day.
10 everyday uses of transport topics on Alexa. 1. While you get ready for work in the morning. 2. While you cook breakfast. 3. While you eat breakfast. 4. While you drive to work. 5. While you're at work. 6. While you eat your lunch. 7. While you're driving home. 8. While you cook dinner. 9. While you eat dinner. 10. Well, let's face it, it's 1 minute with today's biggest industry headlines. The listening options are endless, so why be confined to 10? Simply say, "Okay, Google, talk to transport topics."
We're here in Denver at McLeod Software's 2019 User Conference, and we're very happy to welcome Tom Curie, who's Vice President of Strategic Development for Kingsgate Logistics, a freight broker based out of Westchester, Ohio. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Oh, no, glad to be here. Thanks.
So we're going to talk about AI and machine learning, and you're a real expert on this topic, but let's just start with the basics. What do we really mean by AI? This isn't Skynet from Terminator, right? So what are we talking about?
So it's kind of a funny journey because even myself, as we talk about artificial intelligence, 5 years ago, I wasn't a guy who really would have sat here with you and told you, Seth, well, this is what AI is all about. But really, it's pretty simple. AI is really just using technology to make decisions that humans typically would make. Now, this isn't talking about having robots go get your groceries and do everything else that we're seeing today. But it's about really just leveraging this technology so that it can make decisions that you're already routinely making all day long.
Yeah, and this concept of AI isn't new. Even early calculators were thought of as artificial intelligence at the time, but this has been a really huge topic in the past handful of years throughout the technology world. So why have we seen this resurgence in AI development?
Yeah, I like as people talk about buzzwords and technology, and they think that AI is this brand new thing that no one's ever heard of. But really, if you look, AI has been around since the 50s. This isn't a new concept. It isn't a new idea. But what has changed about the idea is the use of big data. 6, 7, 8 years ago, we were all humming, hey, big data, it's where it's at, big data. But the reality is once we got all this big data, we didn't have a clue what to do with it. There was just so much of it. And so we began saying, okay, how do we use this? And all of a sudden we go back into the playbook and we go, wait a minute, what about this artificial intelligence stuff? We were doing something with it. Now we've got more data than we know what to do with. Maybe we need to revisit this.
Yep, and how are AI and machine learning being applied in the transportation industry today? Can you provide some quick examples of what you're doing at Kingsgate?
Yeah, so AI, machine learning, we're primarily working in that space. I dream of being able to play with deep learning, as I know we talked a little bit about. But as you really think about what we're doing today, we're using it for carrier selection primarily right now. So McLeod has done a nice job of building their product Top Match, where we are feeding in data into McLeod to decide, hey, these are the type of carriers that we typically like, based off of the shipment, based off of the time that we have to cover the shipment, based off of our previous experiences, and a number of different factors that we can feed into that algorithm to then tell us what is the chance of success for this. Is it 92%? Is it 88%? And then we're leveraging that data to then learn from it and say, okay, typically we're actually picking these guys that weren't 92%, they were 80%. Well, what did we like about them more? And we're tweaking that algorithm as we go.
And one way of thinking about AI and machine learning is moving from a predictive standpoint to more of a prescriptive approach. So now software can actually tell you, which carrier is the best fit for a particular load. How is that changing the way that your company is making business decisions?
So it's really interesting. We find ourselves in this new era of leveraging technology and having to do it so quickly. And so it changes the way we've typically made decisions. A lot of times decisions in companies our size, they get held to 5-10 people that maybe they've got all the experience. Maybe they've seen what it was like in 2008. They've seen these experiences, and what we're finding now is we're able to arm brand new employees with technology and data so that they can actually make those same decisions that people maybe couldn't have made 5 years ago. And so we're able to get them up to speed a lot quicker.
Great. And another application I think is really interesting is recruiting. So how are you using AI to find and hire the right job candidates?
Yeah, so recruiting was always a big opportunity for us in the freight brokerage space. We typically are looking for a lot of people for sales or operations, and even as we've expanded our technology team, building out that group. And so we are actually using a product that allows us to kind of refine what we really look for in a candidate. What maybe has their previous jobs been, and maybe what type of skill sets do these people have, or maybe what are some of their affiliations that they're a part of, or tenure, whatever it may be. And as we feed this in, this system, what it does is it produces a number of candidates, a kind of a pool of candidates that we then review. And our recruiting team will go in and they'll look at 5 candidates, and they'll tell the system, hey, is this person a fit? If they are, great. They funnel it over into the pipeline. If it's not a fit, it prompts them and says, hey, why is this person not a fit? And all of that data is being fed back into the algorithm to get smarter and learn better, so that eventually the candidates that we see are typically candidates that we want to have conversations with. And so it slims down a lot of the time that we spend sourcing and just digging through resumes.
Absolutely. And you guys are a 3PL, of course, but you can really, take that further and think about how that same approach could be used to hire the right drivers and reduce driver turnover at a motor carrier. What kind of potential do you see there to help solve, really one of the industry's biggest problems?
Yeah, I think there's significant opportunity there. Seth, I spent time at a refrigerated carrier. We had 200 owner-operators, and when I first came to the company, we had turnover of 133%. And so you imagine just the sheer amount of recruiters that we had to have, and the candidates that would come through, and not to mention just the awful driver experience. I mean, it's hard for guys to start building relationship with people that they're driving with, and kind of these companions on the road for that person to just be gone. And so when you start thinking about the attributes of what you're really looking for from their experience, I think you talk about a technology like that, and you say you reduce that turnover by 20-30%. That's a significant play, not just for the company, but also for the experience for the other drivers that are there.
No doubt about that. And let's just look ahead a little bit. I want to get your thoughts on what you think the future might hold for AI. And I mean, are we going to get to that point where we do move into deep learning, and we're the software is really training itself to and improve itself on even more data?
Yeah, I absolutely think, and I definitely think that we're going to get into more deep learning. When we talk about deep learning, I think what you'll find is, because of the sheer amount of data and the investment that people are going to make into technology, you're going to find a whole lot more people playing in that game. And that's when you start taking, we've got so many data sets coming at us right now, and that is where you're going to be able to say, okay, here's how these data sets can be associated together, and here's what I want to do. I want you to look at every piece of data that could be connected and determine, based off of every data set, what's going to be the best opportunity for us going forward.
Sure. So we see all this opportunity, but I do want to ask you why Kingsgate Logistics really decided to be at the forefront of this and really start to put this technology to use, because certainly not everybody in the industry is.
Yeah, so we kind of started on a path last year working with our ownership team, and we've got a great company, just a phenomenal ownership team, who second-generation family-owned business. And as they've looked at the company and where they see it going for the next 10, 15 years, we're looking at that third-generation family who's going to come in. They're going to continue to be more active. We have 3 members of the third generation who are actively working at the company. And they said, we want to make sure that our business is thriving. We don't want to give We don't want to have this business for our family that is just kind of on the downslide. And so we started looking and say, what does the future look like for our industry? And as we continue to look, we found just such a significant need to be a player in technology. You talk about digital freight brokerage, digital freight matching, pretty much everything that you could name that starts with the word digital. And we said, okay, wait a minute, we can't be the traditional brokerage that we've always been and not play into this digital space. And so we really saw that investment, and our ownership team just this year, they are making a 7-figure investment in technology, which is like nothing we've ever done in the past. And so we've caught the vision, and along with that, our customers and our prospects, they're jumping on for the ride. And as we've seen buy-in there, we've felt confident that we're going down the right path.
Well, that'd be really exciting to watch in the years ahead. But just a final question for you, Tom. Just how much opportunity is still out there for the transportation industry to really do more with AI and machine learning in the years ahead? How much further is this going to take the industry?
I think the opportunity is incredible. Most of the AI and the machine learning that we are leveraging today, it wasn't birthed in the transportation industry. It was birthed in other industries. It was birthed in healthcare. It was built in marketing or whatever it may be. And we've been able to grab it, adopt it, kind of tweak it a bit to make it work for transportation. What I think you'll find is you're going to find some technology providers who are going to step up to the plate, and they're going to start leveraging some of this same technology, and it's going to change the way that we do business going forward.
Yeah, this has been a really great conversation, Tom. It was really a privilege to have you here, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
No, glad to do it. Thanks, Seth.
You bet.
When a Transport Topics reporter sits down to write a breaking news story, he or she knows that every word, every quote, every image matters. Across TT's more than 80-year history, some of the best journalists in transportation have dedicated themselves to getting the stories that this very large, very fast-moving industry needs to read, with new media channels and programs that allow us to extend our reach and tell even more great trucking stories. Web, print, video, podcasting, all part of our repertoire, all part of our craft.
Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to revisit our original question. How will dispatch and operations software evolve to meet the challenges of the future? As we've heard in this podcast, AI and machine learning will open up new possibilities for software development. This will create a wide range of benefits for business management, including smarter pricing, better freight matching decisions, and improved hiring and retention. The transportation industry is already capturing a vast amount of data. Now developers are looking for ways to better utilize it through improved analytics. Expect routine business processes to become increasingly automated, which will free up workers to focus more on customer service and responding to the unexpected events that are inevitable in transportation. While the chatter about blockchain has subsided, it's still on the horizon and will likely begin to realize its potential in the years ahead. And as AI continues to advance, the transportation industry will move toward deep learning. Software will begin to train itself to get better and improve through experience. The sky's the limit on how much more efficiency and decision support we can potentially unlock from all the data that we're collecting. RoadSigns will return soon with more episodes exploring transparency and business intelligence in the transportation industry. Until then, I'm Seth Clevenger. Thank you for listening.